Hello, my grade 10 science students. I'm so excited to be continuing our journey on biology. So, today's lesson is going to talk about specialized cells. And specialized cells here, they're pretty important. They are basically the way that we are able to function because um, I don't know what I've just done, sorry, because we are able to have all of these really cool cells that do all of these really cool things. So, a specialized cell is a cell that's a little bit different than other cells. So, for instance, they have a specific function that they're going to complete. And really, like, I think when I was younger and I was learning about this whole idea of specialized cells, you guys all know that I love gaming. So I was basically just thinking that these were like the elite level soldier that you unlock. Like, you kind of go through this like game and you unlock all of these different levels and then you unlock a specialized cell. But that's not really the case. I mean, we have all of these specialized cells that we probably just think are super common. But if something were to go wrong with one of them, then we wouldn't be able to function properly. So, the first specialized cell that we're going to learn about is the red blood cell. The red blood cell is super important and it's characterized by this kind of donut shape that we see here, and it's obviously red. But the reason why our red blood cells are really important is because they have this molecule called hemoglobin. And hemoglobin actually allows oxygen to bind to it. So, our red blood cells are the whole reason why we're able to transport oxygen throughout our whole body. Okay, so we do all of this amazing stuff by breathing in, but in our lungs, we have these really, really thin kind of vessels by our lungs that allow this oxygen exchange to happen. And as soon as that happens, the oxygen binds to our blood and it gets carried around our whole body and delivered to everywhere that needs oxygen, like our muscles and our other organelles. The next cell is skin cells, and skin cells are super cool to look at under a microscope. So, this is what skin cells look like. Skin cells are really important because they are super, super thin, but they're actually able to fit and be packed so tightly together. And this means that they can pack and be super tight together and form a protective layer over our body. So, the reason why we have skin is actually to reduce water loss. And if we were to not have skin, we would all die because not only are you exposing yourself to infection, but you would also get very dehydrated. Okay, because all of that water is kind of evaporating off of you. It's also a protecting shield, like I just said, from infection. So, usually, in order for infection to get into our bodies, there needs to be a way in. So, that's why touching our face is really bad because, we have our nose, our mouth, our eyes, all of those places are ways that we can get bacteria and infection into our body. And if you were to have cuts on your body, that's also not really good because you can get infections and bacteria that way. So, our skin, although it may not seem like it's doing this super cool job to us, it is one of the reasons why we are alive and able to kind of roam the territory that we are in. Bone cells. This is what a bone cell looks like. And when you look at it under a microscope, it kind of looks like a tree. Okay, so you have that like inner ring and then all of this growth outside of it. And bones, we know, are really important because they help to form our skeletal system in our body. So they're the reason why we are able to have structure and walk around and do all of these cool things. But bone cells are able to actually collect calcium from food. So they're so specialized that they've learned how to do this. And that calcium is essential for allowing growth and the repair of bones. So, bones are super cool. This is why they need to be set when they're broken because they will repair themselves. Sometimes they need help. So, if you shatter something or if it's broken in a weird place, you might need to get pins to help hold it together. Um, but yeah, so our bone cells collect all of this calcium that we get from our diet and they're able to repair uh, bone chips or have growth and super, super cool. This is why when you were younger, it can hurt when you're growing bones. So, just like if you guys have ever read Harry Potter, that's a very painful thing that he goes through. But even when you were younger, you probably had growth spurts. But this is also why you're hungry when you're growing because you need that extra calcium, you need that extra fuel to help go through that process. Muscle cells. So, muscle cells are really important, but you'll notice that they look different. So, Muscle cells are arranged in bundles, kind of like you would stack wood. And we call all of these bundles a fiber. And fiber and muscle cells are really important because they're attached to our bones and they can actually help us move. So they're the reason why we're able to move. We also have noticed that muscle cells have these things called fast and slow twitches, and they're able to kind of tell us whether or not somebody is going to be a little bit more athletic. So we tend to see a lot of different twitching in the muscles when somebody is a natural athlete as opposed to somebody who maybe isn't. And it's all about how these nerves or our brain can control the twitching of our muscles, which is how we tell ourselves to walk forward or pick something up or yeah, basically all of that stuff. So it's super, super important. And basically, we move by contracting our muscles. So it's this electrical signal that's sent from our brain to wherever we're going, and it causes these muscles to contract. And if you kind of go overboard on contracting, so you do a lot of exercise, then you could get a spasm, which can happen. So your body's kind of in overload, but you're also having some different energy outputs in your body. So it could be something like you need to drink more water because your electrolytes are messed up. But yeah, so this is kind of how a muscle cell works. White blood cells. So white blood cells are really important for our immune system. They are one of my favorite cells because they form around things to engulf bacteria and fight infection. So they'll come up to this like bacterial invader and they will engulf it. So they form around it kind of like a Pac-Man would. And I've listed all of these YouTube links under the additional video links on our new schedule. The next one is sperm cell. So a sperm cell is important because it's how animals are going to allow for fertilization to happen. So it's one of the key characters, one of two. Sperm cells are super cool because they're able to move independently. So they have this tail which whips around to help shoot them forward so that they can move. Their head, like this, is in a torpedo-like shape to allow for easier movement. And inside of the head is where all of that DNA is stored. So that's that nucleus. And then there's this acrosome right here, which is going to allow for that sperm to have a chemical reaction with the egg to help penetrate that egg cell. Basically, the sperm cell allows DNA from the male parent to join with the female egg. Okay. Fat cells. Fat cells have an enormous vacuole. So what this means is that there's a huge empty sac of space waiting for the cell inside of the cell. And basically it's just going to store itself with fat and chemical energy. And it stores that. So fat gets stored in cells so that if there becomes a time where, remember, we're descendants of animals. So there's lots of animals that hibernate and they rely on those fat cells to help fuel their bodies. Okay, so that's what this is. If you eat too much and you have too much fat in your diet, then you're going to store the extra. So it's really hard for us to kind of burn fat if you are not using it all. So we burn a certain amount of calories, a certain amount of fat every day. And then, like I said, whatever is extra is going to get stored. The unique thing about fat cells is that they rarely go away. So what will happen is that we will drain this vacuole of all of its fat, if let's just say we needed it. But that cell is still going to be there. So it's still going to be a carrier and an extra storage for when we need to store more fat. Okay. This is why recurrent weight gain is so popular, because unless you're actually removing fat cells from your body, they're there and they're primed to kind of get that fat back into storage. Nerve cells. Nerve cells are super cool. So this is what they look like when we put dye on them. And nerve cells are long and thin, and they have lots of these branches. So we call these branches. And basically what they're doing is they're actually conducting electrical impulses to help us coordinate our body activity. So every time we have a thought, that's an electrical impulse that passes through our brain. I'm talking a lot with my hands right now, even though you guys can't see it. And as I'm moving them, that's because I'm telling my brain to move them. As we breathe in and out, that's an involuntary thing that we do, but our brain is telling our lungs to inhale and exhale, telling our intercostal muscles in between our rib cages to contract and expand. So it's super, super important that we have these nerve cells. And photophores, which we don't have, but a lot of animals like jellyfish do, help to emit light. There's a couple of reasons why this might happen. So, first off, most photophores are either fish or invertebrates, so they don't have a spine. But a lot of these animals tend to live in the sea and so far down in the sea, in the ocean, that there's not very much light. So, the first thing is that they're able to emit light, so they might be able to coordinate a little better. The second thing is that photophores, these cells, can actually be used in a fight or flight reaction. So if someone is being challenged, then they might light up to kind of have their enemies think that they're a little bit bigger, a little bit scarier, maybe even more toxic than they are. So the different colors help to kind of signal to animals whether or not we should eat something. Okay. I've posted this book. This is your kind of assignment for today. So no textbook questions. You're going to read. It's not a book. It's an article. It's like 4 paragraphs. You're going to read this for today, and then we're going to do a check-in tomorrow. But this is it for today's lesson. I just wanted to kind of point out some key cells. And again, all of these YouTube videos I've posted on our schedule.